Okay, well, thank you so much, Colin, for joining us on ERCx Chats. If you don't mind first kicking things off and just introducing yourself, telling us a little about you.
Sure. I am Colin Crowley, and I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience at Freshly. We at Freshly are a healthy prepared meal service, so we're kind of in that food tech space, as it's called, alongside companies like HelloFresh and Blue Apron. But we're a little different because we're not a meal kit service, but we ship prepared meals to customers. So there's no preparation required, and you literally just take the meals, and they're always fresh, and you pop them in the microwave or the oven if you so desire, and you can have a nice dinner pretty quickly. So kind of sit at that nexus of health and convenience. I've been at Freshly for 5 years and basically founded their customer support infrastructure, because when I joined Freshly, there was just one other person in customer support answering all the phone calls, web chats, and emails, and those sorts of things. And so I spent my first year and a half at Freshly just building up the team there and creating all the infrastructure that you need for an efficient organization. So a performance evaluation system and a structured KPI system and different HR policies and a quality assurance system and customer surveys and just all sorts of things. And then since then, we've expanded pretty rapidly. So since 2017, we opened up an office out in Arizona with customer support people, about 40 we have there now, although we had about 80 at our height. And we have an office in New York, which was where our corporate office is located, with a quality assurance team there. And we have a few people in Maryland, and then we have some offices abroad too, two offices in the Philippines. So we're about 220 people all told right now. Prior to Freshly, I was in a different world entirely. I worked for a company called Ticket Network, which is also in the software space, but was kind of like a main competitor to StubHub. So a marketplace through which event tickets were sold. So I was involved in kind of elite customer service there, and also a product manager for a consumer-facing ticket selling application. Prior to that, I was in like the think tank space doing writing and researching. So I was involved in that little world for a while. The other job I have that doesn't pay as well is that I'm also a playwright. So I spend time writing my plays and getting them produced.
So hearing kind of your passions and where you started, and then kind of led into where you're at today, what was your, kind of launch into that customer experience space, kind of moving from your think tank into that?
Sure. I mean, it kind of it definitely through a backdoor route, because I was in the think tank space for a while in Washington, D.C., and simultaneously I was also just starting to work more professionally, I guess you could say, in the theater space. So I had been writing in various things for some years prior to that. And this is around like 2008 or so. I went through the process of getting one of my works, a musical, and I collaborated with someone out in Washington State. And we worked together to get that produced in late 2008. So around that time is when I was doing all the think tank stuff and having this work produced. And I ended up moving from Washington, D.C. up to the Connecticut area where I am now, mainly to help with some family concerns. And I kind of isolated myself from the think tank space because there aren't really think tanks in Connecticut on public policy or anything. So I was looking for a job, and I ended up being contacted by the CEO of this company, Ticket Network, because they at the time were looking for someone who would step in as really a customer service gadfly, or ombudsman as they call it, which is kind of a nifty title. They were looking for someone who would come in and evaluate their customer service infrastructure, because they're a marketplace. So they have their business clients who are listing tickets for sale, and then they have the actual consumers who are buying tickets. And the business had been more oriented, like a lot of marketplaces, on the business side of things early on in order to get inventory in the marketplace first and foremost. But the consumer side had been more neglected. So they were looking for someone who would come in and do an analysis of their current customer support infrastructure and recommend changes that would be more consumer facing and be more positive for consumer satisfaction. And interestingly enough, the CEO was interested in my background because of the communication aspect. So that's kind of like where the think tanks and that sort of stuff came into play, but also because of the theatrical aspects, because I had gone through the process of having a work of mine produced, which involves a lot of operations, so there's a lot of operational components in that. And then there's the artistic component, which speaks to like the empathy and some of those qualities you need to have in order to understand people. So he was kind of a savvy person when it came to understanding human beings. And I was a bit outside the box, so to speak, for that choice. He took a risk on me, and that's how I ended up getting into this whole interesting world.
Especially with contact centers and customer care, you end up having a lot of repeatable or replicated contact center or like experiences, where then it seems really stale or mundane, and the culture of the brand doesn't really show through. So I bet, I think it's exciting that, bringing more people in from a different space, I always think adds more flavor to it, and it gives it a totally different approach. So
Yeah, most certainly. I would say too that generally speaking, when it comes to hiring, for customer support positions, that's definitely true. Where like at Freshly, we put a lot of emphasis on hiring kind of outside the box. So not necessarily hiring someone who comes from a specific call center background, stereotypically speaking, who spent their life in call centers, because we tend to get people who can be very robotic or very jaded after being worn down by years in a cubicle farm or something like that. And so you're getting someone who's not necessarily prepared to be as creative as we expect our customer support agents to be when it comes to problem solving, and also someone who perhaps is too jaded to be as empathetic as we would like them to be. So one of the things that we put a big emphasis on is hiring people who have something different in their background aside from a call center experience. So that could be a big focus on volunteering, where they're doing a lot in their local community, or it could be someone who has a background in the arts. So we've had people who've written screenplays and people who have done paintings and so forth. And we made a good use of people who have that background. And one of our top QA people wasn't even in the customer support space, but was a receptionist at a psychiatric institute. So was dealing with people calling in who wanted to speak to a doctor and were having difficult episodes and moments. So just taking people from a variety of backgrounds that have the skills that are important in customer support, but they haven't been through the ringer, so to speak. So they're coming into the experience where they're less jaded and they're more open-minded, but at the same time balancing that out with people who also have a realistic understanding of the space. Because on the other side, you also want to make sure that it's someone who at least has some experience in the call center space or some experience with an hourly non-exempt job, because there are certain expectations when it comes to attendance and coverage that may not make sense to someone who has a background out of college in marketing. But if you've been in retail or you've been in some other hourly position, you understand that. So it's like a balance of wanting to make sure you have someone who has a realistic understanding of some of the constraints in customer support, but you also want to think outside the box in terms of the larger skill sets, and trying to emphasize people who have creativity and empathy, and trust that they can learn the rest of the operational skills as you teach them.